If you like fully customized water-cooled PCs, then stick around. G'day guys, my name is Corey and I run the Designs by FR YouTube channel, and today we're on progress 3 of our multi-part series Aorus PC. This is a fully custom water-cooled PC and we are creating the case from scratch, absolutely demolishing a Core P5 and creating our own custom panels. So if you like projects like this, then consider hitting that like button and subscribing. I'll leave all specs in the description for the hardware that's going to be used for this build. Let's get stuck into it. So for today's session, I actually found this old radiator bracket, and I saved these from previous case mods where we don't actually use the brackets. Comes in really handy that we save these because right now I have one to use. So today in particular, what I want to do is use this radiator bracket, get it set up on a new piece of acrylic, and we also want to create mounting for a power supply as well. So I'm going to be cutting a hole in the acrylic for the power supply cables to route through. We're also going to be cutting 3 little holes for the fan cables to route through to the inside. And we're also going to be mounting a 360mm radiator to this and using one of the fans to mount the actual pump res combo. So let's go ahead, let's mock this up and let's get started. So my idea behind the mounting of this panel is we want to keep it nice and low because it's central to the ground. Also gives it more stabilization because the radiator is going to be a heavy weighing object, especially once it's full of liquid. So I'm thinking if we just leave a couple of centimeters from the bottom, that should do pretty good for us. Then I need to mark out where I want the holes to go so that we've got proper mounting, and then we can thread those holes. Also, I want the power supply mounted probably about here, and then I'll have the cables going through a hole up around here somewhere. So let's go ahead, let's get that started. We're also gonna have to drill the holes in the back of the case so that the cables can go right through to the center of the Core P5. Just like progress 1 for mounting the radiator, we're going to be creating some holes with a 2.5mm drill bit, and then we're going to thread those for a 3mm M3 screw. So I've got my sheet secure. Let's go ahead, let's get on drilling, and then we'll go into tapping, and then we can go ahead and cut out the radiator spots so that the fans can breathe and take in air. One thing I've learned, and it's been super helpful, and I showed you guys this in progress 2, is when you're actually tapping and threading the acrylic, turn the piece over and do it from the back side, because sometimes the threading doesn't bite the acrylic straight away and it can actually snap off some of those threads. So by doing it from the back side, you know that threading is going to be nice and good on the bottom. One tip that I've learned over the years doing hand tapping. So I'm just going to use a bit of WD-40 to lubricate the holes a bit. Which should not only allow for a nice clean thread, but it should also be a lot easier to get the tap started. So for this system, it's actually very critical as to where I put the components, as to whether it's all going to work or not. Now, I was originally going to have the power supply facing up, but now you can see that I've got it on the side. And what that's going to allow for is when I do put the reservoir on one of the fans, it's able to freely hang up like so and gives it enough room. If I did put the power supply in the middle, then I would have been covering all 3 fans and that would not have been possible. Now, another thing that I do have to think of is whether I want to put the power supply cable hole and how long the cables are and if they're going to route to everywhere successfully. Positioning it here should be no issue. Now, one other thing that I need to think of is we've got the radiator that's going on the back side. When I route the tubes from the radiator, where do I want those to go and how am I going to get them to the front? Now I'm kind of thinking I'm actually going to go through the case and into the distros. However, I'm not 100% sure yet, but we do have plenty of room to play with right here at the back on both sides. So we will work with that as this project gets closer and closer to finishing. For now, let's actually mark out where the power supply is and we can go from there. One other thing that I do need to mention is we also have to account for some holes for fans. So first of all, I want to get the power supply hole cut out. I want to get the fan hole cut out for the radiator. Then we'll work on the fan cable holes. Either that, or I could just bunch them all together with some cable ties and have them route through the power supply hole as well, which is probably not a bad idea. Let's go ahead and just route this out and then we'll figure out how big we want to make the power supply hole. So what I'm thinking here is if we leave a tiny gap, not too big, I'll center that. So I might go, I think that'll be plenty to get the cables through this type of length right there. So now that we've got them all drawn out, let's go ahead and cut those out. So when cutting out the two holes, we accidentally cracked this part. We pulled the jigsaw out, we didn't wait for the blade to stop, and it accidentally went down and shattered this. But that's not too much of an issue because we have our acrylic weld solution. We'll be able to weld this back on and still have this as a usable piece. So what I'm gonna do is I've got my side part here. I've also got my acrylic weld solution. It is a water thin solvent. So it's actually gonna weld these two pieces together just by getting into the cracks between both the acrylic pieces. So if I put the acrylic in place, I've got some of my solution in here. I could go ahead, I could let that drip out in the cracks, that'll fill them in, and it'll pretty much almost hold itself instantaneously, which is great. So if we get some along the whole edge, it should be perfect. So it's pretty good. We don't have to waste a $32 sheet of acrylic. This comes in really handy and it's good because we're gonna be painting over this anyway. You won't even know that the crack's there. So for this next part, we're actually gonna be cutting into the case and I need to make sure that the edges are nice and smooth because if they're not, then the cables could get cut into and that could create a short. So we don't want that. I've taped up the case. Let's go ahead and draw where we need to cut out. We'll cut that a bit larger so it is hidden underneath the acrylic and we should be good to go. So for our last part in this progress, what I want to do is I want to shape the back piece of acrylic to the shape of the case. So we're going to cut out the edges. I'm going to cut along the outside of the line because I want the acrylic piece to be a tiny bit bigger than the case itself. So let's go ahead and get stuck into it. So there you have it, guys. That's progress 3 of our custom water-cooled Aorus PC. As you guys can see, we did make a bit of a mistake over here. We ended up chipping off this piece of acrylic, but we showed you guys how we fixed it and how we can still use this piece, which is absolutely fantastic. So as you can see, the edges are still a bit rough. We have to sand all of the edges down. I'm not gonna show you guys sanding some acrylic. You guys know how that works, but I hope you all enjoyed this progress. Thank you very much for watching. And if you would like to support us, it is greatly appreciated. The Patreon link and the membership link is in the description. Helps us out so much. Piece of acrylic like this costs $32. We'll be using many pieces of acrylic in this PC build, so it's gonna end up costing us maybe $500 in materials all up. That's Australian dollars. So you guys over on Patreon and YouTube members help support the channel by providing money to buy all of these materials. So it's greatly appreciated if you can help us out. I'll leave all of the specs in the description that we are gonna be using for this build. And guys, if you enjoy videos like this, consider leaving a like. I wanna hear your comments down below and consider subscribing. Check out more videos on the channel, lots of custom PCs, reviews, modding tutorials, and much more. And we'll see you all in the next one.